Happy Wednesday and welcome to Weekly Profit Talk. We do this, as the name implies, every single week. It's 8:30 Mountain Time, which is 7:30 on the West Coast, 10:30 on the East Coast. Today's topic is how to deal with the illogical second IRS quarter. Now, a quarter in financial terms is basically a 3-month period of the year. There are 4 quarters, as you might imagine. We use quarters as a measure of metrics um, in a lot of different applications, but the Internal Revenue Service has this infuriating habit of cutting the second quarter short. The deadlines are April 15th, June 15th, September 15th, and January 15th. We're going to explore that a little bit and talk about why they did that. But first, I do want to go over the importance of making a payment in each and every quarter. So one of the things that we want to touch on is the fact that estimated tax payment deadlines are basically not mandated in such a way that we feel like we're going to be in a lot of trouble if we don't do something about them. You don't really have to do anything if you don't want to. But the thing is, the IRS doesn't stand over you and punish you or hit you with a cattle prod if you don't do it. The way the IRS punishes us for not doing things in a timely fashion is they hit us in the wallet. They charge penalties and they charge interest. As far as not making an estimated tax payment, if you owe over $1,000 in tax by the time that you file tax, and you have made no estimated tax payments, and you also had tax liability in the prior year, you're subject to underpayment penalties. So there is a complicated annualization formula in how they charge you that. It's part of Form 2210. If you really have that time and want to know, you can pull one of those up and look at it and go blind over it, because basically it just gives the IRS a logical, on paper way to charge you money for not making an estimated tax payment. There is a 90% rule, by the way, that you should be paying in 90% of the tax that you paid in the previous year. I beg your pardon, that's not it. 90% if 90% of the prior year or 100% of the current year, whichever is less. Yes, I'm sorry. Kind of wool-gathered there for a second. I don't bother with it. I know that it's part of the code, and you only have to do the bare minimum. But in this case, what I like to see people do is try to match the tax expense to the period of time where you're making the money. To the best of your ability. And I don't deal with multiplying that by 0.9 before rounding that off and making my payments. I basically calculate to the best of the ability what we believe that the income is going to be for the entire year, and then figure the tax for that year and turn around and divide that back. As you can see, 2.4 works. There are 5 months in the year, so 5 over 12. The reciprocal of that, 12 over 5, is 2.4, and that's where that factor comes from. So if you multiply this year's current income from January to May 31st by 2.4, that does give you an estimate for the entire year. Figure tax on that, divide that tax by 2.4. Don't forget to subtract what you paid in April, and of course, you would also divide that remainder by 3, because there are 3 remaining estimated tax payment deadlines. This one being next week, and of course also in September and January the following year. And if you do that right, then you're basically looking forward to a tax filing that actually has a measure of how you did, and not so much a time of stress and an ugly trip to the dentist for a root canal, which I like to think that a lot of people look at tax season as. If you view taxes and you have any kind of success at all as a once a year event, you're basically costing yourself more money, bottom line. So, as I've said before, here are the 4 deadlines. If nothing else, take a screenshot of this if you're somewhere where you can. As a matter of fact, the phones all do that now. Yeah, you hit a couple of buttons. These 4 deadlines are critical to, as you were keeping your room neat, the way I like to think of it. April 15th, of course, that's easy enough to remember. One, it's the 15th after a full quarter. Now, June 15th, of course, is after just a short 2-month period, after which there's a 3-month period of September and a full 4 months of January. So why do we have a second IRS tax quarter that's only 2 months long? Well, I figured out, first of all, that actually the third quarter payment kind of makes sense. The federal fiscal year actually begins on October 1st. Now, I know you've seen in the news that Congress didn't pass a budget, and the president, or the Congress did pass a budget, but the president refused to sign it, this sort of thing. That seems to happen later in the year. What you're seeing, what's happening behind the scenes of that is continuing budget resolutions. If they can't agree on the budget by the beginning of the fiscal year, then they basically argue over it and spend our money in ways that I don't appreciate. So, because the federal fiscal year begins on October 1st, the September 15th deadline actually, in their minds, is an opportunity to bring in more cash revenue into the federal treasury. So that, I guess, you can get by me. That sort of makes sense. So why the second quarter? Well, the federal budget process actually begins in early February. Done some digging on this and a little bit of reading. The president proposes a new budget, usually about the first or second week of February, gives that over to Congress. He spends 6 weeks fooling around with it, breaking it up into committees and reported estimates. By April 15th, they have to turn that over to a House Appropriations, which needs to be considered by the middle of May, and there's supposed to be an end of June completion. So all that is kind of clear as mud, but my take on that is that with an additional early deadline, setting that back 3 months prior to the end of, 3.5 months prior to the end of the fiscal year, they have additional money, which they don't have to estimate, but can actually look at tangibly. So that's my possible explanation for why that revenue in June might facilitate the budget process. It's a good guess. I'm not really sure. I've done a lot of digging on this, and that's the best answer I can come up with. So the main thing is our government is hard at work to keep us amused and basically infuriate us at times, but we get the kind of government we deserve. And basically the voting process allows us to change that, theoretically at least, on a frequent basis. So that's it. I would say, though, that the April, June, let me go back to that. The April, June, September, and January deadlines are pretty much etched in stone. So keep these in mind. And remember that if it falls on a weekend, as it does this week, June 15th is a Saturday. We do actually have a couple extra days until June 17th. So reason I'm having this conversation with you now, it's a really good time to sit down, figure out what your estimated tax is, and then be sure to divide that by 3, and don't forget to subtract what you've already paid in April. So get that done because basically having a clean room in your mind allows you to focus on the things that you do to keep your practices prosperous and scaling. So with that, I hope you find that very helpful. I always enjoy talking about this subject. So we will return next Wednesday for another edition of Weekly Profit Talk at the same time, 8:30 Mountain Time. And with that, have a great rest of the day, an awesome rest of your week. And if you have a chance, do something randomly kind for a stranger. So until next week, so